Yep, go ahead.
Great, thank you. I want to call this meeting to order, and I want to thank Shrewsbury Media Connection for televising today's meeting. Going into our board comments, Ms. Last?
No comments at this time.
No? Ms. Shea, Ms. Bryant?
And I'll comment on the new business.
Okay, Mr. DiPaolo?
No comment.
No comment. Great, we'll move into item 3. Mr. Cahill?
Yep, so hold on a second. Sorry. So as you know, the Community Preservation Committee reserves 10% of different parts of the community, excuse me. Kristen, do you want to quickly, go over the 10% for Community Preservation Committee?
Oh, sure, yeah. So did you want to go over the application?
Oh, yeah,
So I'm
sure.
going to go over the buckets. The
Right.
CPC oversees all of the funds that come in through the Community Preservation Act collection. We are required by law to spend 10% of those funds on housing, community housing, and then 10% on parks and recreation, open space, 10% on historic preservation, and then there's another bucket that everything gets put into, and others can apply for any of those categories at one time. So I think we just wanted to have a discussion tonight with the Affordable Housing Trust related to the community housing funds, as Mr. Cahill will present that the Community Preservation Commission is accepting applications over the next few months related to certain tiers that may be of interest for this group.
Right, so the deadline for the eligibility application is September 1st. This is not the actually full-blown application, it's just the eligibility form. So whether a project or proposal is eligible. So it is due September 1st, and then the full application would be due November 17th. So this topic was raised because no applications so far have come in for any sort of housing projects at this time. And also, other towns, they do it just by a matter of course, where the housing trust automatically receives that 10%. So this possibility that we have here is to apply for eligibility under the CPC to get that 10%. So to explain that in a different way, eligibility just means, is this project or proposal of requesting 10% eligible based on CPA criteria at the state level? The CPC would look at it, say yes or no, whether it's eligible. If it's deemed eligible, that project or proposal then has, we had to have 2 months to then apply on November 17th for a full application. This is not for a specific project. This would just be a request for a transfer of funds. So both the eligibility, let me get to it for you. Both the eligibility application and the full-blown application would not be very intense. It would just be explaining the purpose of the housing trust, the goals, the fact that there's going to be an action plan within 12 months that this committee is going to follow. So the discussion tonight is whether or not this committee wants to instruct the planning department to apply for the eligibility for the that 10% and submit it as an application. So that's the form there that you're looking at. There's one more. So the narratives won't be too long, but again, we'd put in kind of the goals and the intention of the housing trust, if that makes sense. And for your information, it was $104,621 that was on the dollars that was on the annual town meeting warrant in May. So the first step would be September 1st, and the second one, provided it's deemed eligible, would be November 17th.
So the 104,000, that's the total in the CPC bucket?
That's our understanding right now, that that's what is available.
Is that fiscal 22 and 23?
So that's what we're also looking into. There was some confusion about which amounts. It was planning's understanding that when we saw those amounts, we saw 2 amounts on the town meeting warrant, that only one of those amounts was the actual amount going forward. So we're in discussions with the Community Preservation Coalition and town accounting to figure out just how much is in fact available. But it's at minimum, that's why I think the request would be for 10%. We want to put the exact number in, if that makes sense.
So the request 10%, we don't have to get into any specifics as to what the intended use will be, and it's just putting ourselves in the pipeline to,
Yeah, I think the use would be to put in what the goals and the mission is of the housing trust, right? And those different possible programs that could come. And then the trust has a little more flexibility. It doesn't have any of those deadlines and timelines that the CPC has.
any,
But I think it's up to the four of you to kind of discuss in your kind of comfort and what, not just comfort level, but what do you think is, just as an idea?
any thoughts?
So it doesn't have to be project-specific.
No. It would just be a transfer of funds.
And if town meeting votes it, it would go into the trust fund.
Correct.
Correct, as of July 1st next
Right.
year.
And so we wouldn't have to wait until another town meeting to get the money.
It would be the May town meeting. to
Right.
Get the money, and we'd get that 10% in July, on July 1st into the trust fund.
Right. I think we should do it.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, getting into the habit of submitting the requests in annually, whether we have anything in the pipeline or not, it's good practice, so that then we can just continue to, increase, the funds that we have in our account.
Yeah, I agree. And it would give us more flexibility as we actually start getting into the mechanics, and we don't have to wait. Because we'd have to go back to a town meeting to get the money released, right? If we didn't do that,
As like a specific project, yeah.
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 And does the money sit in the general fund? If we didn't ask for it, does it go to the general fund, or is it?
No,
It's always set aside for
it's
affordable
CPA
housing?
and it's always in that 10%. So if it doesn't get spent by CPC this year, it just stays there and the next year's gets added to it. Every year it adds out, unless it's spent on a project.
So I would recommend, submitting the eligibility form and, put ourselves in the line there for our 10%.
You need a motion?
Yeah, I would need a motion.
Okay.
So just say entertain a motion.
Yep, entertain a motion to submit the eligibility form to the CPC for the 10%.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
Great. So the next one is the scope of service, which was issued on July 17th. Sorry, oh my gosh, July 11th. The question deadline was August 8th, August 1st. I'm reading everything backwards. And the response to questions deadline was August 8th. We didn't receive any questions. The proposal due date is August 25th, and our hope is to share with you on August 26th any proposals that have come in. Any questions up to that point?
Have we received any interest?
Yes, we have had a couple just general inquiries, but no specific questions.
Did these get, if somebody was interested, they would download these electronically?
Yes, we have them as PDFs.
Right, but did they have to go to the site like they did with Beal?
It's not on the bid site because it's on the planning department's webpage. It's on our webpage.
so
and they
we don't
actually
know who took
They
it down.
solicited it too, so we don't know who took it down.
It's not on
We didn't go that route.
Combis.
So we don't know how many people.
We know
Yeah,
who
we
you
reached out-
solicited.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So we reached out to 6, LDS Consulting, Barrett Planning, Levine Planning, Karen Sonneborg, Wendy Carter Development, and James Goldson were the ones we specifically reached out to.
But you don't know if they all took them.
No, because we don't know who took it, no.
No, I was just curious.
You
Yeah,
sent
no.
you sent them all the RFP.
These are direct contacts with all of them. We sent them and said, we've reviewed what your company does, and, we hope you're interested. Here's the scope. But we don't know who else has seen the advertisement or downloaded it. Like I said, Proposals are due on the 25th, which is next Thursday, and we intend to get them out to all of you that Friday for review. And then you can see here on the timeline as well, the next scheduled meeting it's actually a Monday. We ran into some conflicts with the school committee. So it's Monday, 9/12, so September 12th. And according to the scope of service, that was the date to do the interviews with any of the applicants.
So do we need to meet before the 12th to develop,
No, so we can go through that in just a second. So that's part of it. So I pulled up here, I just took out this last, the couple of the middle pages of the scope. We had some consultant qualifications, and I'm sorry if you can't see that very well, if you recall in it. And then within those consultant qualifications, we had different levels of standards for how we want to, what is the word called, grade them, each of the responses. So so the first one's articulation of a technical approach. I'm not going to read through every last word here. We had 3 different ones: highly advantageous, less advantageous. Advantageous, less advantageous, and not acceptable. So I guess we had 4. Resources and availability, project management, demonstration of their expertise, and partnership and measures of success. So what we thought we could do is planning could provide the committee members with kind of individual matrices that each of you could go through and put in what you feel that response, where their responses kind of fell for each of those. So which level did they fall under for ranking them? And then bring them all back together. And we can figure out a way to share among members as well. I think the idea is on the 12th. I don't think we need to have a meeting prior to that. I think you would want to bring, I mean, by all means, we can discuss it, but we'd want to bring those rankings with you to that September 12th meeting to have those interviews. And then the idea is, I mean, this scope of service did state that there was an anticipated start date of October 3rd. But, I mean, I guess our cop-out is that it says anticipated.
Right.
So if we're not able to meet October 3rd as the start date, I think that's okay, as long as it's within a week or two. I think that's fine. So that's kind of where we're at. I guess the question is maybe just a bit about timing and reviewing those matrices and reviewing the applicants. And I don't know how many, I honestly don't know how many we're gonna get. It could be 1, it could be all 6. We don't know until next Thursday.
right. And then as far as ranking, would you prefer just to bring it that day, or find a way to upload it so that we all have access to it?
So I don't think we can all see it because that would violate open meeting law. I think we all give our rankings to Bernie by a certain date, and then he can tabulate it onto all one spreadsheet and then circulate that back
Right.
out to us. And then we talk about that on September 12th or a meeting prior. And then we make a decision at the meeting if we want to have firms in for interviews or not. But I think we have to do a lot of this in the public session.
Got it, understood.
Okay, so, if I may, we're not interviewing anybody on the 12th.
Well, that, according to the scope, that was the kind of goal, was to get to the 12th, but it doesn't have to be.
Well,
If we are, we need to have a meeting in advance of the 12th.
right, I mean, if there's only 2 vendors, well, even if there's 2, I mean, it might only, after we see the proposals, we might only want to talk to 1.
Right.
But if there's 5, we're not necessarily going to want to talk to 5, I don't think.
Right, want to narrow it down. I see what you're saying.
So
Yep.
if we're going to do the process the way we just talked about, I think we have to have a meeting before that. How much-
Or move the interviews, further into September.
Yeah, may have a meeting on the 12th,
Right.
and then maybe the following week? How much lead time are we going to have to give the consultants?
I don't think we specified that.
No,
We,
but I
we
mean,
should give them at least 2 weeks to
Yeah,
pull
yeah.
together their team and their
I just mean the
document.
scope didn't call it out specifically, but.
no, right, but I mean, just to give them fair warning.
So it would say 2 weeks after them.
So I think use the 12th for us to meet and go over the
Bernie, can you put-
proposals.
I'm sorry, can you
Okay.
put the schedule back up again?
Oh, yeah.
I'll look at my calendar.
Let's say 7/19.
So if we get them on the 26th,
Gives us 2 weeks.
no, I was just wondering if, do we need 2 weeks to do that? That was my
To
question.
score them. I think it depends how many proposals we get. If we get 1 or 2, we can probably do it in a few days. If we get 6, it might take a little bit longer.
Yeah, no, I was just, if we do it on the 12th and we give them 2 weeks, then we're already talking the end of September. I was
I don't
just,
think that puts us too far off from the October 3rd, because it would be probably, what, 2 weeks start after,
yeah, but
we'd have to choose someone, or
Yeah.
you would have to choose someone.
do we have, if we chose someone, if we had an interview, say if we interviewed 2 weeks after, I'm just gonna throw a date out, just say that on 24th, and we selected somebody, you're not gonna have them on board the next day,
No.
right? You're
No.
gonna have to negotiate a contract, right?
It'd be mid-month.
I-
We'll be 2 weeks behind.
It's at our discretion. I mean,
Yeah.
we said in the proposal that it's an
No,
anticipated start.
I'm not thinking about that schedule.
Okay.
I'm thinking about moving at the speed of government, and all of a sudden
Sure.
we're getting close to the holidays. Does it make sense to try to meet sooner than that? Like,
Sooner than the 12th.
well, maybe the week of, well, we can set the schedule when we want, like.
Yep.
I mean, theoretically, if there's only a few, we could meet on the 1st, right? If there's more than a few, we could try to meet on the 8th. Right? At least pick up a few days? Does that make sense? I don't know what everybody else thinks, but.
I just think it just depends on, how many responses.
Right, that's what I mean. If you get 2, doing it on the 1st is no big deal. If you get 5, I mean, we could wing it. I guess maybe we could be flexible, depending on how many we got.
Yep.
Yeah, the 1st is a planning board meeting in here, but the
Oh.
week of the 5th, we could see what's available.
No, I mean, we could do the 31st. I'm just throwing the date out. But
Yeah.
it depends how many we get.
And then we're playing with the dates, because if we meet the week of the 5th, then we're just giving we're only giving them a couple of days to,
No, right, but instead of, if we met the week of the, I gotta look at the calendar. You might be,
you're
you
thinking-
might be able to meet like the week of the 19th, instead of if we met on the 12th, you might pick up a week. Maybe, maybe we should just be flexible and
I
see
agree.
if we can. I just know from experience, and when we do these things, they have a tendency to get longer.
We won't continue to a date certain.
Right.
We'll just leave
Right.
that open, and then I think it sounds like,
Does that make sense? Just keep it open and see
Yeah.
what we get back?
Yeah, I think we're a small enough group that Bernie can pull all our schedules to understand when we could meet based upon the number of proposals and our ability to review them or not review them. And I think we all understand the importance of reviewing them and we'd get it done. But we should definitely be giving the consultants the courtesy of at least 2 weeks from when we make the selection of who we want to interview for them to prepare for that interview.
Yep,
And we
and we
need to
need
give them
enough-
criteria of what we want to hear at the interview as well.
We need enough time too, but
Yep.
that's all relative to how many we get.
Correct.
yeah. So I think on the 26th, a week from Friday, is when we'll have a better sense as to what the schedule's gonna look like.
Do they just do it a certain time, like 11 o'clock or at the end of the day?
I think we put end of day.
Yeah, so, well, you would know the end of the day. You could send an email and say, we got 5, 10,
Yeah.
1, none.
No, we don't want, not 10, not 1.
0.
We'll stick in, somewhere in the middle.
All right, so I think, is everyone agreed upon, we're gonna wait and see how many come in, and then decide based on that when we meet next?
I think that's a way to go.
And we'll hold the 12th as a date, and if we need to move the 12th, we move it. For a
Yeah.
meeting.
So we have a couple of rooms held already, but we'll just look for some more on the week of the 5th and the week of the 19th, just to kind of cover our bases. And so there's no real action required by that one, Mr. Chairman, just a discussion. And does anyone else have any? Sorry, it's not for me to say.
Any other questions? Everybody okay with that?
I just wanted to make sure that everyone was comfortable with preparing kind of the matrix for us all to score the proposals, and then they could put all the results together and kind of identify, are we all seeing 1, 2, 3 as the first one, or are we all over the place, and then we can have that conversation in a public meeting.
So a lot of moving pieces.
A few.
It's a short window, but we'll see what we can do. We'll figure it out a
Yeah.
week from Friday.
We'll see who comes in.
Okay, just another question on the scoring. So we'd all do it, send the scoring in, but then we'll discuss the scoring after the meeting?
At a meeting.
Yeah, at a meeting. Okay. You're not gonna just go, okay, well, we got. Okay.
No, we should definitely discuss, because someone might be at 1, 2, 3, and the other person might be at 5, 6, 7, and then they talk and they're like, oh, I see your point. Like, I really like
Right.
that aspect. So we'll come together and then decide upon the final ranking in a public meeting.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill.
All right. So the next one came up, that letter went out to the planning board about this committee's preference for inclusionary special permits to be at least frowned upon, if not denied, by the planning board for large projects that require some sort of, not require, when an applicant comes in for a special permit, to pay a fee in lieu of providing on-site affordable units. That kind of sparked this greater discussion, and that's why we have number 5, Mr. Chairman, on this agenda item, which is to discuss the whole idea of the special permit fee in lieu. I think it's worth noting that the planning board's been kind of, the last several years now, has been looking at overhauling the entire section, it's section 7K, if you must know, of the zoning bylaw, which is the inclusionary section, and sees that this fee in lieu discussion is really part and parcel of that larger discussion about the whole section being overhauled. Like I said, there's lots of options for, one idea was to eliminate it outright as an option for developers, just not offer a special permit for a fee in lieu. Another option would be to make it just more stringent, the requirements to meet that special permit threshold, just make it harder for either lot size or what have you, what they're offering. The other one would be I had it here, increasing the overall fee that a developer might pay. So we are actually looking into that and doing our research right now, determining, so this goes back to 2006, 2005, 2006, so it's getting quite creaky. And not all of us were around back then in Shrewsbury, so we're not always sure the origin story necessarily of the calculations for fee in lieu. Is it a state statute that we follow it this way? Can we come up with our own? Like, how does it work? What's driving this? So we're doing our due diligence right now to figure out the answer to that question. But those, I think, are the questions that the Housing Trust, the Planning Board, and the town in general just kind of have to grapple with. And obviously, we'll be there to look at other towns and see how other people have, who've done it recently, how they're doing it, what's working. And that's kind of, I think, the way planning sees it, is that the fee in lieu discussion, like I said, just to reiterate, is kind of a one part of this. And I did throw up took out the section of the zoning bylaw, and you can kind of see how it goes through. And then towards the end, you get the different alternative methods for, instead of providing units, off-site units, through special permit, so a board could deny it, land donations as an alternative, fee in lieu of units. And then, believe it or not, we actually have an exemption section where if you meet certain land thresholds and so on, you can exempt right out of it altogether, again, through special permit.
What's that one about?
That one, as far as I know, was only ever used once at 935 Main Street, where actually, in the end, we got them, that was the Wyman Farms project. If they were to have been required to do it, it would have been 4 units. We did negotiate with them to provide for a fee in lieu for 2, but the special permit this is the first and only time I know that a special permit was submitted to the planning board under that. So instead of denying it outright or accepting it outright, it was a negotiated kind of settlement, if you will, where they just said, instead of denying us outright, what if we just give you 2 fee and lieu's rather than nothing at all? Or
Oh, it's not an exemption to get out of it completely? Or is it?
this is, yeah, but that was kind of a discussion that they had at the time. This was 2016 between the board and the developer, because they met all the criteria. And it's the only case I know of where they met all the criteria to be exempt. So that's why they went for the special permit. But again, this is why I think it's important that this committee, the planning board, planning department, and the town take a look at this whole section 7K, including fee and lieu. But love to hear your thoughts about the fee and lieu, and just in light of that letter that was sent to the planning board the other day.
So my question, you mentioned, I can't see it there, off-site units?
Oh, it's-
So, is that a developer that was building 200 units, but wants to, does not want to have the units there, but wants to develop it elsewhere in lieu of, is that the same, that's?
It's an option by special permit, yes.
Yeah. Has that been done here?
No, it's been tried, but it has never been done successfully, no.
I know that, I've seen it in Boston a lot, something that they have done. It's interesting, but, my initial, thought is always, let's eliminate it, but it's never that simple.
Right.
That's the.
The challenge with that one, Mr. Chairman, the off-site units that's come up, because I've had developers approach me about that but never apply in the end, is the equal quality of the units. So like, how does a board weigh knowing that the unit that would have, or is going to be built, and the one they're offering off-site somewhere are roughly equivalent, right? Because that's what our zoning bylaw says, they need to be equivalent. You can't do a rundown studio apartment, that's been there for 60 years and compare it to a brand spanking new one worth $1 million that someone's building and say, no, they're equivalent. Like,
Yeah.
so we don't have a measuring tool for that. So the board has been very hesitant to even entertain them. And that kind of gives people cold feet to developers about saying, they back away when we walk through that. And they're like, well, maybe not. And they end up at fee and lieu.
I think that's the easiest one, and I know that the off-site units is always, the quality, the materials that's used. Identifying something that, will meet that threshold. Scope of the rehab, is it multifamily housing, is it a 3-family house? What they're going to do. It's not just purchase a 3-family house and say, here you go.
Right.
So I think that if we were to consider that, it's, again, setting up, the minimum standards that, we would entertain or accept.
Right.
When I read that over a few weeks ago, I don't know how I missed that exemption part, but I found that a lot of sections that were very vague in general, and to your point of how you're going to make sure that you're getting something comparable. So I think as that gets looked at, we got to figure out how to tighten that up, especially if they're going to build something somewhere else.
Right.
And a land donation, that's problematic in itself, because in itself. If you get the land and we still don't have the money to build it, it's not as much of a help. If they have a good piece of land, they're not going to want to give it to us anyways. So maybe this is something we engage the consultant. They might be able to help with this too.
Yes, and I actually have a note here, and I believe I can look into it, that housing trust funds could be put towards a consultant to help to overhaul this section of the bylaw. I just need to double check on that, but I'm pretty sure that is a eligible use for housing trust funds.
So, just going back to the options, and I'd like to get your thoughts as well, but, if we were to think about, let's say, eliminating it with exemptions, again, using the consultant to help us, what are those exemptions? And not make it, an easy hurdle to clear.
Right.
We want to make sure that, what we're going, if we're going to give something up, they're going to have to work hard to attain it.
Yeah. I think the bottom line is, we want to create affordable housing. So we shouldn't make it easy. And I think, now that you mentioned those other things, that this is a lot more complicated than just eliminating the fee in lieu of. But I do think that unless we can change the amount that they would have to contribute, that's an easy way out. Do it the formula the way it is now. It's a small number. Although if it turns out when they build a duplex and they can build one market rate and one affordable, that might not be such a bad deal for somebody, but still.
Like a density bonus, that they could opt on
really.
for a density
Right.
bonus to up the density if they provide more units.
Right, because they're building an affordable and they get an extra unit out
Yep.
of it. I still think that the goal should be to have it built. I mean, that's the easiest way for the town to get an affordable unit. But I did think that, I don't know if I had spoken to you or Rowan or somebody, I thought that formula was set by the state.
We're looking into it, of the formula for the fee in lieu, because where, our consultant who helped us with this section of the zoning bylaw in 2006 prepared that formula for the planning board and the planning department, and we just want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date formula and that we know where it's coming from and why it's put in place and can it be changed and whatnot, so.
Because even with inflation, that might not have kept up.
Yep.
Whatever. But, this seems like the way to go. I mean, it's not like we're getting 14 subdivisions a year, so.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in Bernie's position, this entire section is very complicated and confusing, and developers can't figure it out, and there's loopholes, and so I agree that we should be looking at the entire section rather than just those exemptions. I think the whole section needs to be tightened up, and I think the Affordable Housing Trust, the Planning Board, and the Planning Department, in consultation with the Board of Selectmen and their direction through the strategic plan, should have oversight. And then we will have to go to town meeting and get a 2/3 vote for any changes, so we just need to keep in mind of our outreach and how we educate moving forward, making these changes.
Say something about that.
So the consensus is
Forgot what it was.
we're going to look at, to see if we can get a consultant to assist us in
That's-
rewriting this?
That's one option. We can certainly look into it as a planning department and let you know. We could do it in-house, perhaps. My preference is to go to a housing specialist because it's so specific and it's so defined. And they've seen, they'll have had experience with dozens of other communities and know kind of what's up to date, everything formulas are, language being used. So we don't necessarily have to I don't think this committee needs to take any action per se, although if you have a preference.
Well,
it'd be nice to
right
find out.
now, right? No, I think we should get the consultant on board myself.
My preference is, again, a consultant, not only for the expert knowledge, but also capacity. There's a lot of other things that,
Yeah.
you and your department are working on right now. And, to take you away from that to, focus on this, I think, better use of time is to have a consultant do it.
What, if I might, what I was gonna say when I was doing some research on this stuff, and I think it was Mass Housing Partnership or DHCD, I don't remember which, was one of those. I know I was on Mass Housing Partnership, but the sample inclusionary bylaw was almost exactly what ours was. So it's almost like everybody's using it, not everybody, but people must be using a template because it was almost like we took it out of the book. So I think if we want it to be more specific, we're gonna need some help.
Yeah, I think we were one of the first towns to actually adopt an inclusionary bylaw, and then many, many other towns have adopted it since then. So I think having the planning department at least do an initial look of who has one, who doesn't, who has one that's more recent,
Yeah.
and just pulling that data together for our committee and for the planning board and the board of selectmen to review. I think that's a good first step.
That was an interesting town meeting. I remember that one. Interesting discussion.
All right. Well, that was the end of my presentation, Mr. Chairman. Anything else about fee and lieu or the inclusionary housing before we move on?
I have none.
None
No.
here.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill.
You're very welcome.
Any new business?
Yes, please, Mr. Chairman. How are the applications going for the open seat?
I lost track of our schedule because we moved our meeting dates around and then moved them back. I think we're gonna act on the 23rd. We don't have many applications, I know that, but I don't know if anything's happened in the past week or two. We were gonna do it on the 23rd, then we moved it to the 30th, and we moved it, then we had to change the 30th meeting back to the 23rd, so I'm not sure. But either the 23rd or the first meeting in September.
Because there was 2 applications the last time, any more?
There's at least 2, and there might be a couple more. I think there were a couple more people who were interested, but I don't know if they came in. Taylor, our admin, was on vacation, so I'll see her tomorrow.
Thank you.
Ms. Les?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Mr. DiPaolo?
I'm good.
Good.
Nothing else, Mr. Chairman.
Nothing else? Well, then, can I entertain a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And our
Okay.
next meeting date will be to be determined.
Right.
Yes.
Yep, okay.
So you'll know, well, we'll all know next Thursday any
Next,
day.
next Thursday will be. Right, all in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I real quick at the